This is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Everywhere you turn, it's the same old sports talk, the same headlines, the same news, and the same boring information. This podcast is here to change all of that. We bring you hot sports takes, winning sports betting strategy and picks, reliable gaming industry news, and breaking interviews with some of the biggest names in sports business. My name is Ryan Newpel, and welcome to the Noop Sports Show.
I'm Rodney Newpel from NoopSports.com, and this is your Lit Fire Sports podcast. Well, the NBA draft is over, and the biggest trade was Jimmy Butler, three-time All-Star from the Chicago Bulls, went to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and now is reunited with head coach Tom Thibodeau, and a lot of discussion on the Jimmy Butler trade. Boy, Jimmy Butler's trainer came out firing last night, basically calling the Chicago Bulls front office liars and with no integrity. So kind of got ugly there. The deal, here's how the deal went. The Bulls picked up Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, and the number 7 pick, which they got 7-footer out of Arizona, Lauri Markkanen. On the other side, then, the Wolves picked up the 16th overall pick, and they drafted Justin Patton. So to kind of recap, Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, and Lauri Markkanen. John Paxson says what we've done is set a direction. We're going to do it with young players. We're going to be disciplined and patient. This is the same team that last offseason said we want to get younger and more athletic. And the Chicago Bulls went on and picked up Dwayne Wade and Rajon Rondo. Neither one were younger and neither one were more athletic than the younger guys. So, I don't know, grain of salt with what John Paxson and Gar Forman are saying for the Chicago Bulls. I do not like the deal for the Chicago Bulls. Reason I do not like the deal is, again, we don't know what exactly was offered before, but a lot of talk about better offers before, such as possibly the 3rd pick, in the draft. Boston claims they weren't willing to do that. There was other teams. Philadelphia at the number 1 pick had some interest in Jimmy Butler, and then you're going to get Lauri Markkanen, which to me is a poor man's Nikolai Mirotic. I mean, I don't know if either one of them can guard very well. They both can shoot it, but how much of a game changer is a set shooter from the outside in the NBA? It's great to be able to shoot. You've got to be able to shoot in the NBA. But if that's all Lauri Markkanen, the 7-footer, can do, the Chicago Bulls are definitely got screwed in that trade. Justin Patton was a pretty good pick for Minnesota. Now, what's he going to do in Minnesota? I thought that was a little bit of an odd pick because Karl Anthony Towns has that spot pretty much wrapped up for a long time, until he decides he wants to go somewhere else or whatever. I mean, possibly trades and things like that, but I thought it was certainly interesting that they drafted Justin Patton, but I love the trade from the Minnesota side. You've got to love the trade from the Minnesota side. Now, what they're going to do at point guard I find interesting. Is Ricky Rubio really going to be the guy? I find it a little bit hard to believe. They've been floating that they're going to trade him. Now, maybe they'll go sign a guy like Derrick Rose. Could they be in play for somebody like Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry? I mean, if they go get a legitimate point guard, and I like Ricky Rubio, but not a legitimate star point guard. But if they go and get a star point guard, then you're looking at that star point guard teaming up with Andrew Wiggins on one wing, Jimmy Butler on the other wing, and then Karl Anthony Towns in the middle. No matter who you put as that 5th spot, whether it's Dieng or whoever it's going to be, boy, Minnesota Timberwolves look like they could be a team that not ready to compete with the Golden State Warriors yet. But let's keep in mind, Minnesota 31-51 last year, really struggled on the road. Tom Thibodeau is going to have to figure out how to get his young kids to win road games. That's hopefully what Jimmy Butler will help them do. Allowed 106 points per game, so going to have to play defense. We'll see what Tom Thibodeau can actually do with this team. It was kind of a bust last year, but what should we expect from them? I don't know. Timberwolves are getting one of the best clutch players in the NBA. Minnesota last year, 15-30. That's a 33% in games in which clutch time minutes this past season. That was the 3rd worst. So if there was a game close, Minnesota didn't win. The Lakers and Nets were worse than that. The drought for the Minnesota Timberwolves, can Jimmy Butler get them over the drought? Well, they haven't been in the playoffs in a long time, 13 seasons, which is more than Sacramento's 11 and Phoenix's 7. Now, they made their odds for win the NBA title from 100 to 1 to 60 to 1. Are the Minnesota Timberwolves going to win the NBA title? I would say no. Golden State's still there, and Golden State's going to have some injuries, but they need to go get somebody. If they get somebody, like I said a little bit ago, they get a legitimate point guard or maybe even a legitimate four, somebody to fill in inside with Karl Anthony Towns. It's not going to be Justin Patton yet, but if they fill those spots, boy, look out for this team. Look out for Minnesota. Again, from the Chicago side, you were the 8 seed last year. I do praise them for making the trade. I just feel like they could have gotten more. If you're dealing with Minnesota, did you even discuss Andrew Wiggins? Could Andrew Wiggins come over from Chicago? If you get a Wiggins in the draft pick, is that enough? I think it is. Chicago gets younger. They get more athletic with Andrew Wiggins. Now, a lot of people are comparing Andrew Wiggins to just being kind of a younger Jimmy Butler. But, boy, I certainly think, you've got to at least make that phone call. You've got to at least make that phone call that Andrew Wiggins is available. Zach LaVine for the Chicago Bulls, very, very, very good athletically. Now, he also did tear his ACL. He's only 22 years old, scored 19 points a game. Remember, he had that monster game last year for Minnesota. Zach LaVine, very, very, very athletic. We've seen him in the dunk contest, but missed games all the way from February 3rd. So you're not going to see him early in the season. You certainly won't see him early in the season. In his last game, he had 20 points. And if you're looking at his stat line, he had 28 in January. He had 40 against the Sacramento Kings just before Christmas. So the guy was putting up points. Averaged 14 points a game in February. Averaged 14 points a game in his short stints there at the end of his. It would have been February. At the end also in January. But Zach LaVine, certainly a talented player. Going to Chicago Bulls. Problem is, Chicago Bulls, if you look at their depth chart, the Chicago Bulls depth chart is certainly interesting because there's point guards after point guards after point guards. Now, Chris Dunn is going to be that point guard now. Chris Dunn should be the starting point guard for the Chicago Bulls. But didn't we just hear about guys that are going to be starting point guards for the Chicago Bulls? I mean, Michael Carter-Williams came over. He hasn't done anything. Jerry and Grant came over in that trade last year. Isaiah Cannon still on that roster. Cameron Payne. Rajon Rondo. Right now, the Chicago Bulls have 6 point guards on their roster. 6 point guards on their roster. In fact, if you look at the Chicago Bulls roster, now this is before free agency and this is before trades. Bobby Portis, Nikolai Mirotic, Robin Lopez, Felicio, Joffrey Levine, Paul Zipser now. I guess would be the starting small forward, but Zach LaVine obviously is going to start when he comes back. Dwayne Wade, Denzel Valentine, Anthony Morrow. And your point guards, Chris Dunn, Rajon Rondo, Cameron Payne, Jerry and Grant, Michael Carter-Williams, and Isaiah Cannon. So the Bulls are going to have to do some reconstruction. But why do you need a 6th point guard? You've got to think Rajon Rondo's on his way out. I honestly think Dwayne Wade's got to find his way out. Is he going to ask for a buyout? A Bulls just going to send him out? I mean, he just said he wanted to say yes to his player option, but you got to think they're going to find a way out for that. All right, that's a look at the biggest NBA trade. Looking forward to the NBA offseason. We'll talk more about the NBA offseason as trades come down, free agents are signed. But an interesting night. Draft night. Chicago Bulls made the biggest splash. Minnesota Timberwolves probably did the biggest improvement. Jimmy Butler's better than anybody in the draft for next year. So Minnesota made themselves significantly better, and I find it interesting to see what they will do in free agency. All right, I'm Rodney Newpel from Noop Sports. That's KNUPsports.com, and this has been your Lit Fire Sports Podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Noop Sports Show. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing to our iTunes channel today. Plus, visit us at noopsports.com for more picks, previews, strategy, and news. That's KNUPsports.com.